The reality of financial repression and government-corporate collusion. 1. Understanding financial repression. You may not realize it, but financial repression is an ever-present factor impacting your wealth. It refers to government and central bank policies that extract wealth and assets from the public to sustain their own levels of debt. These tactics penalize savers, investors, and currency holders through inflation and interest rate manipulation. The most common tools used in financial repression include the inflation caused by quantitative easing, which is essentially mass-scale legalized counterfeiting. The second method involves suppressing interest rates to artificially low levels for extended periods. The objective is not to encourage borrowing, but rather to allow financial elites, who control these rates, to pay off debt at cheaper rates while simultaneously depriving savers of fair returns. This manipulation impacts you directly, causing a constant increase in prices, while the government deceives the public through distorted reports on inflation and joblessness. Footnote: Financial repression is a systemic method by which governments extract wealth from the public, primarily through inflation and artificial suppression of interest rates, in order to pay off massive institutional debt. 2. The consequences of overwhelming debt. The accumulation of national debt has reached astronomical levels, placing the burden on every individual. As of now, each American taxpayer is on the hook for over $55,000 in federal debt. However, this figure does not account for the full scope of financial liabilities. There is also over $200 trillion in bad loans, derivatives, and other forms of voodoo debt that threaten to trigger systemic collapse. The government's reliance on continuous borrowing only exacerbates the problem. In essence, this is a form of financial theft, where the government, without public consent, is indebting future generations to pay for its current and past mismanagement. These irresponsible fiscal policies are unsustainable and set the stage for economic calamity. As the debt continues to grow unchecked, there is no viable strategy for managing it, and citizens will ultimately bear the brunt of the collapse. Footnote: The U.S. government's overwhelming debt, along with its financial obligations, signals a clear path toward potential economic collapse, with citizens bearing the cost of the government's fiscal irresponsibility. 3. The burden of austerity and economic exploitation. The government's reliance on borrowing and taxation to sustain itself has reached a point where austerity measures are inevitable. Tax rates must continually rise to extract more from the productive economy in order to support government and central banks. This situation creates a moral hazard, where wealth is transferred from individuals and businesses to debt-holding institutions. Despite policies designed to reduce debt, government and institutional debt levels keep rising at an unsustainable pace, ensuring that the burden of debt falls on the general public. This perpetual cycle of wealth extraction has left citizens at the mercy of a system that exploits their earnings to pay for the inefficiencies and corruption in both government and corporate sectors. Footnote: Austerity measures and rising tax rates serve as a means to extract wealth from individuals and funnel it to government and financial institutions, perpetuating an unsustainable cycle of debt. 4. The economic crisis and public financial manipulation. As the U.S. faces rising debt, the economy is being manipulated through a combination of inflation, interest rate suppression, and political alliances between government and corporations. For years, institutions have been engaging in reckless financial practices, leading to devastating outcomes for the general public. Bailouts, stimulus packages, and financial crises have increasingly become a means to maintain the status quo for corporate interests while devastating the public's wealth. During crises such as the 2008 financial collapse, the wealth of millions of Americans was stolen as banks were bailed out, yet ordinary citizens bore the burden of the resulting economic chaos. This manipulation of the financial system benefits the elites, leaving the rest of the population struggling with stagnant wages, high unemployment, and diminished wealth. Footnote: The manipulation of financial markets and the consistent bailing out of corporations at the expense of the public result in wealth transfer from ordinary citizens to the elite, reinforcing an inherently exploitative system. 5. Protecting your wealth in a rigged system. In the current economic environment, protecting your wealth has become increasingly difficult as government and corporate interests work together to drain resources from the public. One way to protect yourself is by transferring your assets into tangible items such as real estate, physical commodities, and precious metals. These assets are less susceptible to the same manipulations that affect currency and investments in financial markets. Moreover, avoiding derivative products, stocks, and other speculative investments that are tied to the failing financial system is critical to preserving your wealth. Ultimately, those who hold physical assets outside of government control will be better positioned to weather economic turmoil. Footnote: to safeguard wealth in an increasingly manipulative financial system, it is crucial to invest in tangible assets that are insulated from government and corporate financial control. 6. The path to economic reforms and restoring liberty. If any progress is to be made in terms of economic reform, it will require a collective, unified effort by the public to demand changes. While corporate and government interests remain deeply embedded in the financial system, public activism and unity offer a chance to reassert control over economic policy. It is essential to push for a system where government no longer acts as a tool for corporate control but instead functions to serve the public interest. The idea of economic reform is not only about reducing government interference but also ensuring that institutions and corporations no longer hold undue power over citizens' lives. If we are to regain our financial independence, the public must collectively reject the current economic structure and demand a system that truly works for everyone. Footnote: true economic reform will require public unity to break the bonds of corporate and government control, demanding a financial system that works for the people rather than the elites.